Do you know what I like to research? Controversial issues. I think it's the Aries in me. And what is more controversial within the bookish sphere than judging books by their cover? So let's do just that. Well, more specifically, today we'll be talking about the evolution of book covers, the cover design industry as a whole, the recent surge in the use of cartoon covers, aka what I have deemed the cartoonification of book covers, current controversies in cover design, along with the future of book covers within the publishing industry. Get out your popcorn, settle in. Let's start with a stroll through Barnes. It's Saturday morning, and you're looking for your next 5-star that will not only be entertaining and insightful, but also maybe make you seem like an intellectual so that you'll end up on Hot Guy reading a book on the Metro Instagram. Look, we all have different aspirations in our life, and that's okay. But what is this? When did Cartoon Network enter the chat? I must be mistaken. Surely these are children's books. No, my friends, those are book covers a la 2024. Yeah, the artwork on the front that isn't actually what you're paying for, but sometimes it is, as everyone loves owning a pretty book. Who cares about what's inside, as long as it looks nice? Said every alpha man ever. Although likely a poor indicator of a novel's merit, a book cover is actually one of the most powerful marketing tools that can drastically impact a novel's success. It's the very reason why many of us pick up a book in the first place. I know if I see a pretty book, I am going to want to read it. Can't tell you anything about the plot, but a small part of me is already trying to justify purchasing it. This necklace is going to keep slipping. It is supposed to go like this. Everyone always thinks I'm wearing it wrong. I know how to wear my own necklace, okay? The cover acts as a form of visual storytelling that, if well designed, will attract readers, represent its genre, tone, build brand recognition, and distinguish itself from competitors. In a crowded market, that's task. So how do they, the publishers, do this? Psychology. Everything always links back to psychology. For example, colors evoke specific emotions and associations. Not to bring this back to me, but if we look at my romance shelf when compared to my thriller and mystery shelf, there is a very different vibe going on, as the bright, vibrant colors used by many rom-coms tend to evoke feelings of happiness and excitement, while dark, cool tone colors common in the mystery and thriller genre create a tense, ominous mood. Another notable contributor to a successful cover is the typography, as fonts like serif have a more traditional, elegant feel, while sans serif can convey modernity or simplicity. Additionally, composition or placement of certain elements can alter the overall sense of balance or tension. A composition trend that has popped up in recent years that I found kind of funny is when the author places his name up top in a large font where the title would typically be. This is done typically to either signify the genre or author who have branded themselves. Stephen King does this a lot. If you pick up one of his books, you know it's probably going to be disturbing. I've read one of his novels and yeah, I'm good. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But what I kind of found funny with this trend is that sometimes smaller authors, or maybe it's the publishers, will do this to make the smaller authors seem larger than they actually are. Like, that's smart, but I just think that subtle use of trickery is kind of funny. And saying that, this tactic does make sense in genres where a lot of the titles are similar. I'm, as you may know, an avid thriller reader, and the amount of novels I come across where the title is some variation of The Couple Next Door, The Couple at Table 6, The Couple, it's insane. However, if an author's name is there smack dab up top, it's easy to differentiate the books. Historically iconic and instantly recognizable cover designs that use such strategies include The Great Gatsby, with its elegant yet simplistic design that captures the essence of the Jazz Age, along with the enigmatic allure of Jay Gatsby. There is also the worldwide success of the Harry Potter series, with its use of detailed illustrations, whimsical typography, and vibrant colors consistent throughout the series to allude to the magical world within. Again, the cover of a novel for many people is their first point of contact with a book, and if not well designed, I hate to say this, but it's just one more reason why one should choose to spend their precious time and money elsewhere. This issue can be the case with many independently published authors who do not have the same resources available as in traditional publishing, as indie authors are more than likely not market experts, on top of already being an author who spends most days writing and not studying market trends, and that is not even counting the second job many authors have to support their lifestyle. So I could give you a very detailed description of all the back and forth that goes into traditional publishing, but I think that would get kind of repetitive. So I'm going to try to sum this process up as succinctly as I can, but still in a way that highlights the complexity of it all. And this will vary depending on the publishing house. But basically, within a publishing house, the art department, after receiving briefs, will come up with a concept for approval. Following are numerous jacket meetings, staffed by heads of various departments, including marketing and sales. Then the concept will go to an illustrator to create sketches for approval. Eventually, when final art is complete and released via an ARC, issues may arise leading to some minor changes or as major as complete trashing and redoing. Once books are printed and shipped to bookstores where the cover can be displayed and underappreciated by patrons, the cover design process is done. Until, of course, the book goes into paperback. Let me ask you though, do you notice any notable person missing in this process? If you said the author, bingo, gold star for you. An appeal to independent publishing is that an author can have more control over their novel, including what the cover looks like. In traditional publishing, the author may be consulted during cover design or not, depends on the publishing house. And this is typically because it can be problematic if the author butts heads with the jacket committee. An author may want their book to look this one way, which is totally valid, but the expertise of the marketing team may want to go in another direction, which may be and is more than likely what will do best in the market. A great example of this is Bonnie Garmus's thoughts on her US edition of Lessons in Chemistry. This book literally about subverting the expectations of women frustrated some readers as the cartoon cover seemingly targets women, as such covers have become popular within chick lit or rom-coms. I hate the word chick lit. It's so demeaning. One Goodreads user points this out and went as far as saying that the cover belittles the book in exactly the same way Elizabeth Sott, the protagonist of the book, is belittled. Bonnie Garmus actually responded to this and agreed with the user, but concluded that still publishers have a lot of experience knowing what an audience will respond to, and they thought this was the best way. I don't want you to go away thinking that all authors don't have a say in their covers, as to quote Monique Sterling, a freelance graphic designer and former senior designer at Penguin. In an interview, she states that, in my experience designing for the children's side, if an author strongly dislikes a cover, their concerns and feelings aren't simply dismissed. She goes on to say that within the imprint she worked at, they regularly shared cover sketches with the author for feedback and approval before moving on to final art, just to ensure everyone's on the same page. Since this video is all about book covers, we need a bit of historical context. Get out your pens and paper for the Evolution of Book Covers 101 with Professor Sara. The earliest forms of books dates back to ancient Egyptian papyrus scrolls made from reeds widely available in the Nile. Believe it or not, monopolies are not just modern-day Amazon-like companies, because by the 6th century, Egypt had essentially a monopoly over the papyrus trade. As you can imagine, a scroll was not very practical. Like, give me a second, let me just unwind my 8-foot-long scroll here. But it wasn't until sometime between the 2nd and 4th century, when the spread of parchment coincided with the invention of the codex by the Romans, that a more user-friendly book-like design was created. The codex, made by sewing folded sheets of papyrus or parchment, was bound between wooden covers. So finally, we have something that looks like a book. The next major invention, started in China around 700 CE, was the use of woodblock printing. However, this process was kind of painstaking, as it involved carving an entire page of text onto a wooden block, inking, and then pressing said block to paper. Fast forward to the 14th century, when paper manufacturing began earnest in Europe. We know him, we all love him. Well, what we know of him. Enter Gutenberg and the printing press. In the 15th century, goldsmith Johannes Gutenberg invented the movable type printing press to allow for individual letters to be rearranged. As the saying goes, how does it go? Knowledge is power. And the printing press enabled knowledge to spread wider and faster than ever before, as books became cheaper to reproduce in a relatively short amount of time. Just to drive home how big of a deal the printing press was, the Harry Ransom Humanities Research Center estimates that before the invention of the printing press, the total number of books in all of Europe was around 30,000. By 1500 CE, the book was thriving as an industrial object, and the number of books in Europe had grown to as many as 10 to 12 million. Someone do the math. How big of a markup is that? I am not a math major, and I would rather just not do math in my free time. All that being said, books as a form of advertising was not mainstream until the 19th century, with the introduction of mechanical bookbinding and the steam-powered press, which is different from the movable type printing press. Don't confuse the two. The steam-powered press used steam power. Wow. Who would have thought? And rotary metal cylinders. Not a mechanic either, so not sure how all that works. But what I do know is that all of this advancing technology led literary rates to rise and led book covers to become more than just a means of protection, but a key platform through which to communicate and sell. Leather bindings gave way to new cloth covers, which were not only inexpensive, but now also printable. Yay! We now start to see covers designed using lithography, embossing, and gilt, and later halftone illustration. In the 1920s, paper dust jackets, previously there to just protect the publisher binding, began to sport designs. Originally, many covers were inspired by the 19th century poster artists, as well as the arts and crafts and Art Nouveau movements at the turn of the 20th century. I want to highlight a notable artist at the time, Aubrey Beardsley, whose design of the Yellow Book is one of the first examples of a commercial cover art that majorly influenced book covers in the early 20th century. This literary artistic periodical, published between 1894 and 1897, had covers that took a more avant-garde approach in which naturalistic elements were refigured as abstractions. When analyzing the Yellow Book covers, we can see why this periodical was so successful, as the cover utilized some of the techniques we discussed earlier. For instance, the bright yellow cover not only made it stand out in sharp contrast to other literary magazines, but it also hinted at the more controversial material inside, as these covers were linked to French novels at the time that were wrapped in yellow paper to indicate the more scandalous content within. It's interesting to note that yellowness as a symbol of decadent corruption was reinforced in the Picture of Dorian Gray, released in 1890, in which Lord Henry corrupts Dorian by giving him a French novel bound in yellow. Furthermore, in the Yellow Wallpaper, released in 1892, yellow is a sign of modern horror and madness, as the protagonist's repellent yellow wallpaper is symbolic of the repressive society and the narrator's struggle for freedom. Thus, the yellowness of the Yellow Book gave the periodical an alluring edge, both appealing and repulsive, posing a dare to conservative consumers. Although modern day, these covers may not seem that special, at the time they were considered provocative and asserting, as each affirmed the presence of the new woman. These covers challenged traditional views of femininity and represented a more radical understanding of women's role in society. For example, in cover 2, a woman is presented as an intellectual in her library. Yeah, women read. Wow. I'm going to use a direct quote here from Dr. Simon Cook in his article on the Yellow Book. Cover 1 depicts a lady of pleasure and the man as her client, challenging Victorian proprieties. The openness of their encounter is depicted as scandalous or risque, and is amplified between the contrast in the woman's laughter and the man's sinister silence. It should be noted that in 1935, with the introduction of the paperback by our friends over at Penguin, books became affordable for the mass market, furthering the cover as a vital marketing tool. In post-war era, as the publishing industry grew more and more competitive, this is where we start to see covers becoming more stylized and genre-specific, with designs that stood out and pushed boundaries to attract sales. Also, with international distribution, books needed to adapt to the country in which they were sold, which leads us into our next side tangent of cover differentiation among countries. So why do covers differ country from country? Well, when publishers buy the rights to a book, they are buying the text, not the cover, as the cover is the property of the initial publisher. This means international publishers have a choice. They can either negotiate a license for the initial cover or design their own. Most of the time, publishers choose the second option, as this enables them to tailor the cover to their specific audience, as different countries have different markets and cultural tastes. For example, let's look at US versus UK covers. While British covers tend to use more darker colors or negative space, American covers tend to be flashier, and even though this is disliked by many, tend to show people on the cover, while British covers often feature more ambiguous depictions, leaving what the character looks like up to the imagination of the reader. According to Megan Wilson, New York-based book designer, when talking about how the US market is always trying to reach more and more people, she states that, "When I go back to the UK, I think they're often more sophisticated and take more risks. I wonder if it's because the market is so much smaller versus our trying to reach such a broad audience." Let me know if you are more of a US or UK cover person. I usually like UK covers better, but I think that's because I get tired of seeing like the same types of covers in bookstores. So online, when I come across international books, my brain is like, fancy. Also, international editions have this unattainability element to them, furthering this elitist facade they have, as you're either going to have to be a serious collector to own a bunch of them, or just have a ton of money just burning a hole in your pocket to be able to afford to stock your library with so many international covers. Along with a cover change, international publishers may choose to change the title of the book as well. Some well-known examples of this include the US, People We Meet on Vacation versus the UK, You and Me on Vacation, or the US, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone versus the UK, Philosopher's Stone. When talking about her book Damsel, author Evelyn Skye sums up why this is the case. She says, although a story can be loved by readers everywhere, those readers are not the same everywhere. For example, the word damsel might have a lot of meaning and cultural significance in one country, but it might not pack the same well up in another. For instance, the German version of her book Damsel includes the subtitle The Path of Fire, while the US version does not. Additionally, in the Ukraine, the book is not called Damsel, but rather Maiden Against Adversity. Jumping back to the Harry Potter example, allegedly Rowling and her editors decided to change philosopher to sorcerer in order to not misinform the audience, as a philosopher in the US commonly refers to a scholar of philosophy rather than an alchemist or magician. You should also keep in mind that although changing the cover of a book can impact its success in the country in which it's sold, some books are just not going to perform as well in certain parts of the world due to societal or cultural differences. There will always be your worldwide bestsellers such as your Stephen Kings of the world or your Agatha Christie's, but the content and tone of a book largely affects how readers relate and ultimately how well the book sells. Trends are going to come and go. However, I don't think we have experienced such a dramatic shift in cover design since the emergence of the cartoon cover. One genre that has really taken this trend and run with it full speed ahead, pedal to the metal, is the romance genre. With its roots in the romantic fiction of the 18th and 19th century, in novels such as Samuel Richards' Pamela or Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, romance gained popularity during the Jane Austen era as women were offered a glimpse into a world that was previously unheard of, a world in which women had aspirations they strove to achieve and were treated as equals by their partners. This is also when we start to see the stigma around romance start, as men of this very patriarchal society viewed these changing ideals with contempt. Keep in mind that in the early 1800s, society was split into two distinct spheres, the public and domestic. While men went off to work, women were often relegated to the house to cook, clean, take care of the kids. Well, this is what somewhat financially stable white women lived. Women of color lived completely different lives, but essentially 19th century men saw romance and were like, hold up, let me reenact this for you. What's that? What is this my wife is reading? Samantha, God forbid you read such scum that puts these ideas into your head that there is more to life than bearing my children and being at my beck and call. Although in recent years romance has become less stigmatized, many people do still view this genre as frivolous and not real literature, despite many romances featuring complex, strong, intelligent leads and touch on relevant societal issues. Historically, romance has primarily been read by women, and one of the first publishers to utilize this and market directly to women was Harley Quinn Enterprise. Through selling their books women frequented, such as drug, grocery, and department stores, these novels became readily available to the modern woman. Now, these books were far from the Allie Hazelwood, I'm gonna eat you alive covers common nowadays. Not me just holding up one of those books. Instead, they reflected the conservative social ideals of the early 1970s and featured couples who rarely displayed physical affection with one another and instead looked out to the audience, a direct marketing tactic to use to attract potential buyers. However, thank goodness for the women's liberation movement and the sexual revolution of the mid to late 1970s, as society's perception of women and socially accepted norms about sexuality and relationships completely shifted. By the 1980s, the term clinch cover was coined to describe the more provocative and risque covers that once dominated the genre. You know those Fabio romances? This guy, who was a real guy, mind you, appeared on over 466 romances. That is crazy. No offense, I don't see it, but teach their own. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, photorealistic covers were the norm until 2020, when the rise of book talk led the term to become synonymous with these illustrated cartoon-like covers. In the romance aisle today, one will find a completely different selection of books from the former clinch and photorealistic covers popular within the genre only a few years prior. Like I said, I don't think a trend in cover design has dominated a genre to this magnitude before as the cartoon cover has in the romance genre. And I think there are are a few notable reasons for that. Probably the most widely accepted one is that these covers are modest in design, meaning that readers are often more comfortable reading a genre that has historically been stigmatized, or say someone is new to the genre. An illustrated couple is going to seem a lot less intimidating than a shirtless hunk embracing a conventionally attractive and far too unrealistic fair maiden. Cartoon covers have also allowed for more diversity on the shelves, as well as for authors to bypass potential stereotypes. Helen Huang, author of The Kiss Quotient, noted on her Facebook page when talking about the cover reveal for the mass market paperback edition that she had specifically requested an illustrated cover for the original book because I wanted to slip past unconscious bias with a fun illustrated cover. I could be on equal footing with other authors and tell a story with an Asian person in it without race being the biggest part of it. Additionally, many people like to imagine the characters for themselves, and with these abstract cartoon covers, the characters can really be whoever you want them to be. This blonde chick could be me, or just some blondie I conjured up in my mind, and that's for my discretion. Many romances have also embraced a more lighthearted and comedic approach to storytelling, and these covers are sometimes, emphasis on sometimes, an indicator of the content within. The explanation my more analytical social media brain found the most interesting is that the rise of social media, more specifically the book community on social media, has encouraged publishers to push for covers that are Instagram friendly. If something is aesthetic and looks good, it's going to perform well on social media, which in recent years has become an increasingly crucial promotional tool. A few of the most successful uses of the cartoon cover, in my opinion, and as evident as being New York Times best-selling authors, are from Emily Henry and Tessa Bailey. Each of their books is an eye-catching bright color, and specifically when looking at Emily Henry's novels, feature the same bold text, creating a sense of uniformity across her books, which, as we talked about earlier, is helpful with branding. The covers are also designed in a similar art style that many readers enjoy for the aesthetic. Tessa Bailey's cover designer, Monica Rowe, states in an interview that fans love having such brightly colored covers on their bookshelves. They face them as many art pieces to be displayed together. At first glance, these covers are pretty modest and do not imply to be romances, as the characters on the cover are often separate with body language that is seemingly platonic. Additionally, across Henry's novels, the characters' faces are often hidden or obscured somehow, making it easy for readers to place themselves in the character's shoes. Obviously, the cartoon cover is hardly the first example of a design trend that has infiltrated bookstores. For instance, when Twilight was released and grew in popularity, many books, including some literary classics, got re-released in a minimalistic white and red cover Twilight-esque design. Classic literature also goes through cover redesigns all the time, as it's a great way to appeal to the current market and entice potential readers to pick up an older book. As we talked about, cartoon covers have been a pretty positive force within the romance genre. However, it's undeniable that these covers have also sparked controversies. Cartoon covers, although fun, are youthful in nature and resemble books read by younger audiences. I'm going to show you two covers, and I want you to tell me which one is adult and which one is YA. Yeah, it's pretty unclear. That's a problem, especially when one contains explicit content. It's even not uncommon to see books such as Icebreaker or The Love Hypothesis in the YA section. I know I have, despite not being appropriate for children. Over the years, the line between YA and adult fiction has become increasingly vague, leading to the creation of a whole new category of books deemed new adult fiction, which a lot of these romances fall under. However, don't think that new adult fiction is any less explicit or spicy than adult fiction. Generally, a new adult novel is classified as such due to it following a recently turned adult protagonist, hence new adult. Since these covers can cause young readers to unknowingly purchase explicit content, this raises the question of whether it's the responsibility of the publisher, author, bookseller to provide some type of content warning for what buyers are purchasing, as instances such as this one review I'm about to read you will continue to occur. When reviewing the romance novel Icebreaker, this review recounts, "My fifth grader had it on a reading wish list. I saw the cute font and high rating and thought nothing of it. My child took it into school and I got the awkward teacher phone call telling me the book was filled with sex and bad words." After reading this review, I immediately thought, shouldn't you as a parent be checking that what you're purchasing for your child is appropriate? Which, yes, but it's also important to keep in mind that not every parent has the means to micromanage micromanage their child. Have you seen this economy? Some parents have to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Side note, reading all the 1-star reviews of Icebreaker, it's hilarious. Like, if you're bored and want some entertainment, highly recommend. But I will say, it's alarming how many people don't vet their children's books, because I do think it's predominantly the parents' responsibility to check that whatever type of media their child is consuming is appropriate. But I can also acknowledge thinking that all households are able to do that is a privileged point of view. And I personally believe that, to an extent, as a collective society, it's important that we protect the innocence of children, as that's a right all children should be entitled to. The countless instances of the youth acquiring such content has seemingly fallen on deaf ears, as from what I can tell, no action has really resulted from all this discourse. The most I have seen is Barnes & Noble having a display table of select 18+ spicy romances. Meanwhile, other 18+ romances are a mere few feet away, waiting for those tiny grubby hands to be grabbed, looking like, come on, children's books. So if publishers and booksellers know this is happening, which they do, and are just choosing to do nothing about it because, hey, it's not their responsibility, they're just trying to sell books. But isn't ignoring these concerns just another confirmation that they're okay with this, that they're okay with selling explicit content to children? I don't think it's far-fetched to even question if publishers take the cartoon route as a tactic to reach a broader audience. I'm talking like Gen Alpha here. You know, after getting kicked out of Sephora, where are you gonna go? Barnes & Noble, obviously. And maybe some of y'all are like, Sarah, you're crazy. Remember, I'm just posing hypotheticals. For anyone arguing that children can already access such content anyways, such as on Wattpad, let me counter that by saying that there's a difference between a child using their own volition to go on the internet and access that material, and publishers allegedly using these cartoon covers to advertise such content to young audiences. Or at the very least, not caring that children are reading and buying explicit work. So since everybody loved the Goodreads logo I created in my Downfall of Goodreads video, y'all just loved it so much, I decided to design an example of a romance cover for how I think all romances should look and be advertised as. Here, let me just pull it up. Obviously, this is a joke. But in all seriousness, I want to raise the question, should books be required to have some indication, such as a little sticker indicating that the material inside is 18+? If some type of measure were to occur, not saying I would support it, but I do think stickers would probably be the best way to go about it, as that's something readers could easily pull off after purchasing. The music industry is already doing something similar. If you go to a store to purchase a CD, or let's say you look up a song on Spotify, you will see a little indicator next to the song if it contains profanity. However, enforcing such content warnings is a slippery slope, as it could quickly turn into another form of censorship. As what exactly constitutes a book as mature? Books containing sexually explicit content? Books containing profanity? Most books in a bookstore are already not for children, so it would probably be a bit excessive if 3/4 of the store were required to have a little 18+ sticker, even if a lot of them only contain a small amount of whatever is considered mature. I can also see such regulations causing authors or publishers to release, say, fewer romances if they're going to have to put a little sticker on them that more than likely will cause them to lose sales. Again, this ties back to the stigma around reading romance. Some people will probably feel embarrassed to buy a book that has a little 18+ sticker on it. They really shouldn't, but that's the world we live in. So there's a lot to consider when it comes to this conversation. It's very nuanced. So far, there doesn't seem to be a answer that would not harm the publishing industry in one way or another. But again, what about the children? The second issue I want to touch on involves not just cartoon covers, but cover designs as a whole. And that is the use of AI generated art. This issue I have a bit of a stronger opinion on than the last. Recently, some novels have featured AI artwork on the cover. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I don't like. I understand that this can be a cheaper option, which could be especially useful for indie authors. But when massive publishing houses uses AI art, we have to question the ethics around AI. As AI generated art not only poses a risk for artists and their job opportunities, but is borderline, in my opinion, stealing. Because what these AI programs are doing is taking various pieces of art from artists who in most cases do not consent to their art being used and mixing it up into one Frankenstein piece of art. It's perfectly fine to use other people's artwork as inspiration, but what it is not okay to do is take someone's art, insert it into a program, change a few things about it, and call call it your own, which is essentially what AI is doing. AI art devalues the work of actual artists, and if not pulled into check, honestly makes me scared for the future. It's only a matter of time before AI becomes the norm in art, so let's just not. Another trend that has recently gained momentum in publishing are the release of special editions. For avid fans whose favorite book has just been revamped, or just for book collectors in general, this has been fairly well received. However, these editions are not without their own controversies. Some view special editions as vain and just another way to commodify reading, which I agree, but come on, they're so pretty. I personally don't view this as that big of an issue. As in our society, people are going to want to own things. We live in a capitalist society that forces consumerism, and that's sadly a societal problem that will probably never change. So if one wants to collect special editions of books they have never read, then so be it. That's not me. I would want to read or have read the special editions I own. But if collecting pretty books brings you joy, I think that's great. I'm with you. I wish I could own more special editions, but my wallet has priorities like food and rent. I think the real issue lies when one collects special editions just as a way to show off and be like, oh, look at all of these pretty books I'm able to afford. But if someone's just collecting and displaying them as the piece of art they are, then I see no problem with it. Let's talk about the future of cover design. Again, trends are gonna come and go. Maybe in a few years, the cartoon cover will be a thing of the past, which I wouldn't be surprised by, especially since the romance genre has become so oversaturated with cartoon covers. The only trend I personally strongly dislike is, unsurprisingly, the AI cover. Though with the continuous rise and new developments in AI, I think we will only be seeing more and more AI-generated art covers hit the market. Speaking of trends I don't like, what other trends does Sarah want to see less of? In her very subjective but correct opinion, when a book has solely flowers on the cover, this is nothing special. It's frankly boring. If we're going to have characters on the cover, I don't want them to look at me. It's creepy. Let's leave that trend in the 20th century. Those straight-on, monochrome, ominous thriller covers, no. They just have a certain vibe that I'm not a fan of. By the way, I'm not trying to call out any of the books I pop up on the screen. I'm talking just about the cover, not about the book's content. But to also highlight a few cover design trends I want to see more of. Weird abstract covers. These are probably my favorite kind of covers, as they're just perplexing, but funny. I also do love myself a retro moment on a cover. And then when covers are just so pretty that you can't help but stare at them all day and admire their artwork. The weirder the better. I just like weird covers, okay? They're fun. That is going to be it. I went down so many different rabbit holes while researching for this video, so I hope you guys maybe learned something new. These videos are merely a means for conversation, so let me know your thoughts on all this. Do you love or loathe cartoon covers? Or maybe you're more of a special edition gal? Should measures such as content warnings be set in place to protect young readers? Thoughts on AI and cover design? If you want to see more video essay, commentary type videos, let me know what other topics you would want me to discuss. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really does help me my channel out a lot. You can also comment, interact, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. Y'all know the drill. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you're having a fantastic day, a fantastic week, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.